Story 1. Everything is a personal slight to them. Don't want a drink they offer? What? A drink for me not good enough for you? Pass them in traffic? Road rage. Story 2. Sometimes there are no signs. My daughter broke up with a guy who was soft-spoken and kind. As far as anyone knew, he had no criminal history. He killed her. Some survivors brought up something really important. There are usually signs, but they are often hard to recognize, especially when no one has ever taught us what to look for. In Rosara's case, we didn't realize anything was wrong until after she was gone and her friends shared things that, looking back, were red flags. But at the time, none of them, not even Rosara, saw them that way. Honestly, I don't think we would have either. That's why it's so important to talk about these things openly and make sure young people and adults know what unhealthy behavior can look like before it turns dangerous. Red flags in teen dating violence and domestic violence. They want to know where you are and who you're with all the time, even when it doesn't make sense. They blow up your phone and get mad if you don't text back right away. They try to control who you can talk to, hang out with, or follow on social media. They say, if you really loved me, you would, and try to pressure you into things you're not ready for. They guilt trip you when you set a boundary or say no. They get jealous easily and call it love, but it feels more like control. They insult you, sometimes in a joking way, but it still hurts. They get mad or silent when you bring up your feelings, and somehow it always ends up being your fault. They act totally different in front of other people than they do when you're alone. They make you feel like you have to fix them or save them. You start to feel nervous around them or like you're walking on eggshells. They threaten to hurt themselves if you leave. That's not love. It's manipulation. They say, no one else will ever love you, or make you feel like you can't leave. Story 3. All these answers are good, but remember, anyone can be violent and you just do not know. My dad is skinny, under 6 feet tall, does not drink, goes to church, and helps in the community all the time. In public, he is never quick to anger and is very polite. Let's just say he is the reason I learned boxing and continue to frequent the gym to this day. Story 4. I found that abusers always start by trying to violate small boundaries first. They try to touch people in subtle ways and act innocent when reprimanded. In reality, they are trying to condition their potential victims. Story 5. If they hit the wall, then what is going to prevent them from hitting you? It always starts with the wall. Story 6. Being aggressive with objects. My ex threw things, slammed doors, and stomped her foot before she started hitting me. It's a sign that they don't know how to cope with anger or frustration without damaging something. This doesn't apply to people who hit pillows, punching bags, or similar items. Those people have enough self-control to wait, find something safe to hit, and limit themselves to that object. You need to worry about the people who take out their physical aggression on whatever is within reach, because one day that might be you. Story 7. Talking about how they were wronged every time, for example, in every failed relationship, friendship, or job, or even why a dinner goes wrong or the bedroom is not clean, the problem was always somebody else. I speak from experience. Story 8. They do not have empathy, especially if something does not initially register as a problem for them. For example, if one of your coworkers gets badly hurt and they do not really react or seem to care, but then immediately behave like they care as soon as they see other people caring. To be clear, someone can have low empathy or no empathy and still be a good person and make good choices. They can be genuinely sweet, helpful, and wonderful people. Having this trait does not automatically mean someone will be violent, but everyone I have known who became violent did have this trait. Some were better at pretending to be caring than others. Some even had jobs where caretaking is a key factor. Another overlapping red flag is if they genuinely and logically think one group of people is less worthy of safety than another, less important, less trustworthy, less valuable. Whether it is racism, classism, sexism, transphobia, nationalism, religious differences, or any belief, that one group should be given protection while another should be controlled. If you meet someone who lacks empathy and also holds that kind of belief, they are likely to become violent under the right circumstances, not just toward the group they think less of, but toward anyone. Story 9. I had a friend a long time ago who threatened my pet when they spilled some water. They shook with anger and balled their fist. then justified it with childhood trauma. For me, it was not just their actions but the fact that they justified their barely contained violent rage without apologizing that made me end the friendship. Story 10. The expressed desire to harm others. I have seen parents say they wish they could get away with hitting their children. Story 11. An overwhelming amount of personal loss and being wronged too many times. You can see it in their eyes and hear it in their quietness. The calm before the storm. Story 12. For me, it has been men who are possessive and jealous. My very first boyfriend was extremely jealous and possessive and started to get violent. I left. I was dating another man and saw a glimmer of the same jealousy right away at a party with him. He ended up pushing me down 3 stairs that night. I turned back to look at him, and he was smiling at me as if it were a joke. I was done. Both of them ended up stalking me. Story 13. Poor emotional regulation is the biggest red flag. I am not talking about people with anger issues. Even people who get sad very easily can respond with violence in some contexts. Believe it or not, depressed people get frustrated feeling the way they do sometimes and lash out just from being sick of it. Story 14. When they lose in their video game and slam their controller on the desk, injuring themselves in the process. In my first relationship, I witnessed my ex do this and it freaked me out. He was 25 years old, not a kid. Story 15. I wish I had definitive answers about this. There are obvious overt predators, and then there are covert ones skilled at deceiving others. I had a physically abusive ex in my late teens, and nobody believed me when I spoke up about him cheating on me and laying his hands on me. I was met with responses like, "He said you were in an open relationship. Oh, I thought you knew. He said you were okay with it. He said you cheated on him, actually." Nobody believed me when I mentioned him beating me. It was, "What? He would never do that. But he's so nice." Him? No. He also stalked me, repeatedly running into me in public for 2 weeks, threatening and begging me to get back with him. This led to him breaking into my mother's apartment, where I was living at the time, and raping me, which I didn't feel comfortable disclosing until last year. I withdrew and stopped hanging out with my high school friends immediately after the relationship ended because they didn't care and couldn't be trusted. They weren't worth confiding in or sharing anything personal or vulnerable with, and they continued to associate with him. He was arrested after brutally beating his next girlfriend, Shannon, who was 14 when they started dating and he was 21 in 2010. The arrest happened in 2014, and there was a police log with several charges from that event. I have tried to find more arrests and thought he would have been put on a sex offender registry by now due to his preying on and grooming teens. No results. Story 16. Injured hands and knuckles on a person, or someone who frequently arrives at work or school with a facial injury and does not participate in sports. Story 17. I was raised in violence. Something wrong in my family's genes. We have a killer instinct. My father was a violent man. I learned early that for him, violence was a status symbol. Violence became my way to be safe. I never took pride in it, but I have the capacity to be extremely violent. I scared myself sometimes by the things I would do to keep myself and those I love safe. Violence is inherent in our species but exaggerated by many environmental and social factors. The number one way I identify threats is by how they look at people. Violent people can identify me too because I am always watching. The way I look at threats, people who seem dangerous, is how those same threats look at potential victims. When I see that look, I make sure the potential perpetrator sees my look too. There is an invisible game of dominance happening often in social circles that many are not aware of. I hate it, but it is what it is. If you are worried someone is violent, pay attention to the way they look at people. You will recognize the coldness, like a shark that has just smelled blood. I know the look well because I still wear it on my face when I need to feel safe. Story 18. Punching walls, throwing video game controllers, and hitting things when watching sports are signs of anger. Such behavior is not appropriate for anyone over 15 years old. If they have a pet, observe how the pet interacts with them. If it is a man and he strongly dislikes cats, that can be a warning sign. Story 19. They make many out-of-pocket jokes to test your boundaries. They do not show respect the first time. Story 20. See his personal space, pay attention to his speech, and of course, his eyes. If he loses his temper, you will see it in his eyes first. How he gets tense, his fist. Do not ignore these things. Story 21. When you see blood on their living room floor and ask why it is there, they reply, "Oh, it is nothing." Story 22. Senpaku eyes and the sociopath stare. Also narcissism and deliberately talking over other people constantly. Story 23. They do not take accountability for anything, whether it is something big or small. Financial problems are someone else's fault because they ask them to go out. If something is misplaced, someone else must have moved it and it is their fault. If they hit you, it is your fault because you were annoying them. Story 24. If someone cannot have normal conversations with disagreements without starting to yell, they are not a good person. The escalation from calm disagreement to yelling is most of the time indicative of a lack of self-control. You are relying on them being adamantly non-violent physically when they are clearly escalating violence verbally. Story 25. A partner who tells you they broke their computer keyboard over their knee because they were angry at you. A few days later, they say they punched the tile wall in the shower because they were angry at you. I am grateful we were over before keyboards and tile walls became my face. Story 26. I would say that a person starts to raise their voice whenever they feel annoyed by any little thing, such as losing a board game or not having the final word in an argument. Story 27. We are all potentially violent. That is the problem. You want to look for signs of a tendency towards violence or controlling entitlement. We are looking for an obvious outsider, but those are the ones caught early and sitting in prison. Story 28. When they verbally imagine scenarios where they could be violent but still be seen as the good guy. For example, talking about wanting someone to trespass so they could legally shoot them. Story 29. For relationship violence, it involves controlling behaviors known as coercive control. This is a strong predictor of severe violence or homicide. Story 30. No accountability and becomes angry with clenched fists and intense eyes when confronted or when you mention what they did. I ignored that with my last ex, the worst abuser I have ever met. He knew my long-term ex had a temper and did the same thing but 1,000 times worse in a shorter period. My long-term ex was far from perfect, but the last one deliberately tried to abuse me in a similar way, only worse. He wanted to break me down and make me miserable while trying to convince me he was good for me and that I was crazy. Story 31. Lack of accountability is the biggest warning sign in others for me. Violence is the worst-case scenario, but lack of accountability can manifest in many forms of danger to one's peace. Story 32. When people try to mislead you or have a history of it, I have never purposely been misleading. I do not like being perceived as potentially violent either, but violent people are scary, so I stay away from them. Story 33. Quite possibly, when they suddenly talk about putting you into a trash barrel and pouring acid on you in the middle of the desert. By the way, this actually happened. Story 34. Short fuse and explosive temper. Cutting you off. Getting upset over small things. Being verbally aggressive first. Having two personas. One public and one private. Story 35. There are different types of violent people. One type you might be able to detect is someone who easily changes their opinions in a way that does not make sense to you, or someone who constantly makes you feel very good, especially when you have called them out for doing something wrong or after they hurt you. Another type of dangerous person knows exactly what you are worried about and plays on it. You might not notice unless you are like that too. Story 36. Hitting pillows to let anger out is a huge red flag. Violence in any form as a way to vent is very concerning. Story 37. How do they justify seeking revenge, righting wrongs, saying they cannot control themselves, or claiming, "You made me do it," or "You do not appreciate me"? Do they de-escalate situations by getting tired from stress and calming down, or do they escalate situations by making things more stressful or worse, possibly planning for revenge? Do they find satisfaction in dominating others in real life? Are they rigid in their views or engage in black and white thinking? Do they seem overwhelmed often or overcommit themselves? Do they lack self-reflection? Can they be unusually cold? Do they value success or public image over compromise and resolution, as well as the well-being of others? Or do they override others' own beliefs? Do they forget the harm they have caused? Are they charming but inconsistent in their behavior? If the answer is yes to these questions, there may be a tendency toward violence based on my experience. Story 38. I do not know, but when I left him, he freaked out and vented to everyone. He told everyone everything he was supposed to keep to himself out of revenge. I did not find out about the identity theft until later. Most importantly, he tried to convince family members to force me into a rehabilitation stay so that I would not leave Las Vegas without him. Story 39. They need everything to go exactly as they envision and become angry if it does not. They experience sudden flashes of anger that come on very quickly. When this happens, they might hit or throw an object nearby or even an animal. Although they may promise never to hit you, they eventually will. They are quick to threaten and intimidate, showing no concern for your feelings or boundaries. They may make harmful jokes and act irritated and dismissive when you express discomfort or fear. Sometimes, everyone loves them, and no one can tell that this person is violent unless the violence is directed at themselves. The biggest warning sign is if someone close to this person, such as a spouse or child, says that the person harms them. While people sometimes lie, the statistics on domestic violence are too high for that to be anyone's first assumption. Story 40. They care about social status. They have a big ego and even more if they also have low self-esteem. Story 41. I think it is when they are abusive to animals. Could be a clear indication they have violent tendencies. Story 42. My father is charming and has a great sense of humor. Most people feel the same way about him. He is an all-around decent, highly intelligent man. However, my sisters and I know better. He is a literal ticking time bomb. He is extremely violent and beats us all the time just because he is upset about something. If I am with him and we run into someone he knows, I warn them that he is dangerous. One person even told him that I said this, and my father confronted me about it. I simply asked, "Don't you ever get tired of ruining people's lives?" He then knocked me out right there in the yard on Easter Sunday in 2017. Story 43. I tend to be suspicious of people who have many marriages or engagements relative to their age. I am not talking about people who got married, it did not work out, and they got divorced. I am not even talking about people who have one short-lived marriage. I am talking about 35-year-olds with 2 or 3 ex-fiancés or ex-spouses. That is very suspect to me. They may have a history of very short, whirlwind relationships that almost always seem to progress to an engagement. It is never my ex. It is always one of my ex-fiancés. We have all met someone like this who can never just date. They can never just see someone for a year or two and then decide whether to move to the next step. They have to meet someone and become intensely involved in them. They have to own them in some way. People who have patterns like this are, more often than not, violent or at least psychologically abusive. They are not the kind of person you want to become involved with, even platonically. Story 44. You tell him there are too many strangers. Respond quietly with an argument that will suffice. Scream when words fail because he is violent. Story 45. There are always 2 sides to the story. A woman can either bring out the best or the worst in a man. It does not surprise me that even gentle, nonviolent men can be pushed to their limit. I believe anyone can potentially be violent. If anyone harmed my children, for example, I would have no hesitation in defending them. Story 46. 1. Deliberately killing smaller creatures. Being interested in fishing and hunting. Being interested in guns and weapons. 2. Stealing. 3. Telling lies. Gossiping. Speaking harshly. Speaking divisively. 4. Cheating. 5. Alcohol use. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.